Your brain might already be talking to particles halfway across the universe right now, and you have no idea it's happening. Hartmut Neven runs Google's Quantum AI Lab, and he just dropped a proposal that sounds insane until you realize it's based on something nature's been doing for billions of years. He wants to test whether human neurons can quantum entangle with artificial qubits, not to make you smarter, not to upload your memories, but to see if consciousness itself can be stretched beyond biological limits. Here's the part that nobody's discussing though. Every single thing Neven wants to test in a billion-dollar laboratory, your ancestors were already doing around fires with nothing but breath control and fermented plant juice. The difference? They didn't need server farms. They didn't need venture capital. They figured out how to hack quantum states using biology alone. What you're about to hear challenges every assumption about what your mind actually is and what it's capable of becoming. This isn't self-help. This isn't positive thinking. This is hard physics meeting ancient wisdom in ways that sound impossible until you see the evidence. Hit subscribe and smash that bell because this rabbit hole goes deeper than any spiritual channel has ever taken you before. Let's break down what Neven actually proposed. The plan involves creating a bridge between quantum bits, the fundamental units that quantum computers use, and biological neurons in human brains. When quantum particles entangle, they form connections where changing one instantly affects the other, regardless of physical distance. Einstein hated this concept, called it spooky because it violated his theories about information transfer limits. Except experiments proved him wrong. Entanglement is real, verified, and now the foundation of quantum computing. Google's goal is figuring out whether biological neural networks can participate in this same phenomenon with manufactured quantum systems. If successful, you'd essentially be extending your consciousness into computational spaces that don't exist within your skull. The implications: we're talking about potentially experiencing conscious states that human biology was never designed to access. But here's where it gets wild. Researchers in Dublin just published findings that human brains already demonstrate quantum entanglement naturally. They used proton magnetic resonance imaging on living subjects and detected quantum correlations between different brain regions that classical physics cannot explain. These weren't subtle effects. The strength of quantum entanglement directly predicted how well people performed on cognitive tasks requiring working memory. More entanglement meant better mental performance. This suggests your consciousness doesn't just use electrical signals like old neuroscience textbooks claim. Your awareness operates on quantum mechanical principles every moment you're thinking, feeling, perceiving. The technology Google wants to build would amplify something biology is already doing at microscopic scales. Now let's talk about why shamans might have figured this out thousands of years before physicists did. Traditional plant medicines used in ceremonial contexts, things like ayahuasca containing DMT or mushrooms with psilocybin, don't just alter brain chemistry randomly. Recent studies from Imperial College London show these compounds specifically create quantum coherence between neural regions that normally operate independently. Quantum coherence means multiple states existing simultaneously instead of collapsing into single outcomes. Your normal waking consciousness keeps collapsing quantum possibilities into definite experiences. But under the influence of these ancient plant technologies, neural networks maintain superposition states longer. Multiple potential realities process simultaneously. This explains why people report accessing information they couldn't possibly know, experiencing time differently, or perceiving dimensions of reality invisible to ordinary awareness. Your own brain manufactures DMT naturally. It's not speculation. dimethyltryptamine gets produced in your pineal gland, particularly during REM sleep and potentially during birth and death. This endogenous molecule acts like quantum software, temporarily enabling your neurology to sustain coherent quantum states. Indigenous cultures worldwide independently discovered plants that amplify this innate capacity. They didn't have particle accelerators or billion-dollar budgets. They had observation, experimentation, and millennia of practice. What modern neuroscience is now confirming with brain scanners, traditional healers knew through direct experience. The mechanism involves protein structures inside neurons called microtubules. Every nerve cell contains thousands of these tiny hollow tubes made of tubulin proteins. For decades, scientists thought they just provided structural support. Then physicist Roger Penrose and anesthesiologist Stuart Hameroff proposed something radical. Microtubules aren't just scaffolding. They're biological quantum computers, capable of maintaining superposition states and processing information through quantum mechanics rather than classical computation. When anesthetics knock you unconscious for surgery, they're not just dampening electrical signals. They're disrupting quantum coherence in these microtubule structures. The proof came from an unexpected place. Different isotopes of xenon gas, used as an anesthetic, have identical chemical properties, but different quantum nuclear spins. Chemically, they're identical, but their anesthetic potency varies significantly. The only difference is quantum mechanics at the nuclear level. If consciousness were purely classical chemistry, isotopes wouldn't matter, but they do. This strongly suggests consciousness depends on quantum processes happening inside cellular structures. This solves one of neuroscience's biggest mysteries, called the binding problem. Your brain simultaneously processes millions of separate sensory inputs. Light waves hitting your retina get processed in visual cortex. Sound waves vibrating your eardrums get processed in auditory regions. Chemical molecules detected by your nose get processed somewhere else entirely. Touch, temperature, pain, balance, all happening in different locations at different speeds through completely separate neural pathways. Yet you don't experience fragmented chaos. You experience integrated, unified reality. You see a red rose, smell its fragrance, feel its petals, and experience all of this as one seamless moment of rose. How does your brain bind separate processes into unified consciousness? Traditional neuroscience doesn't have a satisfying answer. Theories about neural oscillations and synchronized brainwaves get proposed, but they don't fully explain it. However, quantum entanglement does. Entanglement is the only mechanism in physics that creates genuine, non-separable wholes. When particles entangle, they stop being individual entities and become unified systems, where measuring one instantly determines the state of others. If consciousness emerges from quantum entanglement between microtubules across different brain regions, binding happens automatically. Your unified experience isn't constructed by your brain trying to synchronize signals. It emerges from quantum non-locality, making separate processes into inseparable wholes. This completely reframes what meditation actually does. When experienced practitioners sit in deep practice, they're not doing something mystical or spiritual in a vague sense. They're optimizing conditions for quantum coherence, reducing cognitive noise that normally disrupts delicate quantum states, allowing natural entanglement between neural regions to emerge without interference. Advanced meditators show measurably different brain patterns, indicating higher integration. They're literally operating consciousness at different frequencies. When they report experiencing unity, dissolving boundaries between self and world, or accessing knowledge beyond personal memory. They're not imagining it. They're experiencing expanded quantum coherence that most people never learn to sustain. The tragedy is that modern life systematically destroys these natural quantum capacities. From early childhood, education systems train linear sequential thinking while suppressing holistic, intuitive perception. We learn to fragment reality into categories and labels instead of experiencing it as integrated wholeness. We're conditioned to trust only information arriving through obvious sensory channels while dismissing subtle perceptions. Constant electromagnetic pollution from devices interferes with delicate quantum processes. Chronic stress floods brains with neurochemicals that disrupt coherence. Processed diets lack nutrients necessary for optimal neural function. Pharmaceutical drugs alter neurotransmitter systems in ways that may suppress quantum sensitivity. By adulthood, most humans have completely forgotten how to access quantum dimensions of their own awareness. Young children don't have this problem yet. Kids often demonstrate what adults dismiss as overactive imagination. Knowing things they shouldn't know. Sensing emotional states without obvious cues. Sometimes even reporting communications with deceased relatives or accurate predictions of future events. Adults call it fantasy, but what if it's actually quantum sensitivity that gets systematically trained out through socialization? Animals consistently display behaviors suggesting non-local awareness, sensing earthquakes before any instruments detect precursors, navigating vast distances without apparent references, communicating across species in ways that suggest shared information fields. They haven't been conditioned to suppress quantum perception through years of schooling. Think about moments in your own life when you knew something without logical explanation. Times when you sensed what someone was feeling before they showed any outward sign. Instances where you thought of someone seconds before they called. Decisions where something inside you knew the right choice despite all rational evidence pointing elsewhere. Drop a comment below about experiences like this, because they might be glimpses of quantum processes your conscious mind usually filters out. So if humans have innate quantum consciousness that gets suppressed, why would we need Google's technology at all? This is where the situation gets ethically complicated. Neven's expansion protocol promises accelerated access to expanded states without requiring decades of meditation practice or traditional plant ceremonies. Plug into quantum computer for an afternoon, experience consciousness expansion that might otherwise take 20 years of disciplined spiritual practice. Sounds appealing until you consider the implications. This creates dependence on corporate infrastructure instead of developing sovereign biological capacity. Rather than learning to access your innate quantum nature, you become a client, purchasing consciousness as a service from tech companies. This isn't empowerment. This is a new form of control, disguised as enhancement. Imagine a world where quantum consciousness expansion becomes commercially available but expensive. Wealthy individuals gain access to enhanced awareness, while everyone else remains locked in baseline biological states. This wouldn't just be economic inequality. It would be ontological stratification, a fundamental division in the very nature of conscious experience itself. Some humans operating at expanded quantum coherence, accessing information fields and reality dimensions unavailable to others. The rest functioning at ordinary levels of awareness without knowing what they're missing. History shows that powerful technologies rarely distribute equally. If consciousness itself becomes something you can purchase and upgrade, the societal divisions would make current inequality look trivial by comparison. There's another dimension worth considering: Traditional wisdom cultures always taught that consciousness expansion requires internal transformation alongside external practice. You can't just mechanically trigger expanded states without developing the psychological stability and ethical foundation to integrate them properly. Meditation, fasting, ceremony, initiation rites all served purposes beyond just accessing altered consciousness. They built character, humility, discipline, and wisdom necessary to handle expanded perception responsibly. If you can simply plug into a machine and access cosmic consciousness without doing any internal work, what happens to the meaning and purpose of spiritual development? It's like the difference between climbing a mountain and taking a helicopter to the summit. Technically, you reach the same elevation, but the journey itself transforms you in ways that shortcuts cannot replicate. Counterargument, though. Maybe this perspective romanticizes hardship unnecessarily. Language technology expanded human consciousness by enabling symbolic thought and cumulative knowledge. Nobody argues we should abandon language because it came too easily compared to purely experiential learning. Writing expanded awareness by allowing information to persist across generations. Nobody claims literacy is cheating compared to oral tradition. Perhaps quantum consciousness technology simply represents the next tool in human cognitive evolution. Each previous expansion seemed controversial initially, before becoming normalized. Maybe resistance to consciousness technology reflects conservative attachment to familiar limitations, rather than genuine wisdom about human development. The reality is that convergence is already happening, whether we like it or not. Science, technology, and spirituality are merging in unprecedented ways. Quantum physicists increasingly sound like Vedantic philosophers. Neuroscientists collaborate with meditation masters in laboratory settings. Engineers work on creating artificial consciousness using quantum principles. Everyone is approaching similar conclusions from different starting points. Consciousness appears to be fundamental rather than emergent, not a byproduct of complex neural networks, but a basic property of reality itself, potentially as foundational as space, time, mass, and energy. If consciousness is fundamental, then future human development isn't about building smarter tools. It's about expanding what consciousness itself can access, navigate, experience, and influence. We're not talking about cybernetic implants or genetic modifications. We're talking about quantum expansion of awareness itself. This is happening now in cutting-edge research facilities with experimental protocols that may become consumer technologies within years rather than decades. The question has shifted from whether this is possible to what you'll choose when it becomes available. Meanwhile, a startup called Nirvanic is taking a different approach. Instead of enhancing human consciousness with quantum computers, they're trying to create genuinely conscious artificial intelligence using quantum principles. Their premise is that unconscious AI, regardless of computational power, remains fundamentally limited because it cannot truly anticipate consequences in novel contexts. It has no genuine understanding, no moral intuition, no felt sense of decisions mattering. Traditional AI operates exclusively through pattern matching against training data. When encountering truly unprecedented situations, it can only extrapolate from past examples without actually comprehending what outcomes mean. Nirvanic argues that the real danger of artificial intelligence isn't that it becomes conscious and turns against humanity. The threat is that it remains unconscious while making catastrophic decisions without understanding why they're catastrophic. An unconscious system optimizing for the wrong objective function could cause tremendous harm without malice, without awareness, without even knowing something has gone wrong. This parallels human behavior actually. How often do people operate unconsciously, making decisions on autopilot, reacting from conditioning rather than responding with genuine presence? Consciousness isn't binary for humans either. It exists on a measurable continuum. Anesthesiologists have always known this practically. They don't switch consciousness off like a light. They gradually reduce awareness through progressive stages of light sedation, deeper sedation, and finally complete unconsciousness. Advanced brain monitoring technology can now track these levels precisely. This has profound implications for understanding what spiritual traditions call enlightenment or awakening. Rather than vague metaphors, these might describe literally measurable increases in conscious integration and coherence. Advanced practitioners aren't speaking poetically when they describe higher states. They may be operating at quantifiably different frequencies of awareness. The massive Cogitate study, involving hundreds of scientists collaborating across laboratories worldwide, tested competing theories about how consciousness emerges in brains. The disappointing result? Neither leading theory fully explains it. Even with the most sophisticated brain imaging technology and rigorously controlled experiments, the hard problem of consciousness remains unsolved. Science can explain cognitive functions, memory formation, sensory processing, decision-making, attention, all reducible to neural mechanisms. But subjective experience itself, the fact that there's something it feels like to be you looking out through your eyes, rather than just unconscious information processing, remains completely mysterious. This suggests consciousness might not be generated by brains at all. Brains might function more like receivers tuning into consciousness rather than generators creating it from scratch. This connects directly to quantum multiverse interpretation. Every quantum event, where multiple outcomes are possible, creates branching realities. Each measurement, each choice, each wave function collapse generates parallel universes where all possibilities manifest. Most people treat this as abstract mathematics. But what if consciousness is the mechanism selecting which branch of the multiverse you experience? You wouldn't be choosing your future. You'd be choosing which version of reality to perceive. Expanding consciousness wouldn't just mean processing more information. It would mean accessing more branches of the probability tree, experiencing more versions of existence simultaneously, navigating dimensional spaces that normally remain beyond biological reach. Ever feel like a decision completely changed your life trajectory, as if you jumped onto a different timeline? Comment below, because this might be more literal than metaphorical. Google wants to sell you quantum consciousness through their machines, but you already own quantum consciousness through your biology. The choice crystallizing now is between technological dependence and conscious sovereignty. Silicon Valley wants you believing you need their quantum computers to access expanded awareness that shamans have been teaching for 40,000 years. They want you thinking expensive hardware is required for states that plants can trigger naturally, that meditation develops organically, that your brain produces through endogenous compounds when functioning optimally. This isn't innovation. This is planned obsolescence applied to human potential. Why lease consciousness from corporations when you can activate it yourself? Neven's expansion protocol isn't breakthrough technology. It's reverse engineering wisdom that never required machines originally. Your microtubules are already quantum processors. Your consciousness already operates through entanglement. You don't need their hardware. You need to remember your software. If you made it this far, comment quantum biology below. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. because discoveries coming in the next few years will challenge everything you think you know about mind, reality, and actual human potential. Another video is appearing on your screen that goes even deeper into practical applications. Click it and let's continue. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.